What is up, everyone? Welcome to the RotoWire Showdown Champions League show. My name is Jack Burkart. You can find me on Twitter at Jack Burkart. And we are here to discuss the semifinal second leg between Inter Milan and AC Milan. So, in the first fixture, we had a situation where Inter were really dominant in the first half. They created a lot of really good opportunities, and they converted two opportunities with relative ease. So Inter, I think quite deservedly so, are entering this tie 2-0. So they get to be the home team in this leg. So I think they'll have their home fans. I don't think the San Siro was split between two fans, but feel free to correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. So yeah, Inter appear to be very well in control of this tie, and AC Milan, they're going to have to find themselves chasing some way to figure out this two-goal deficit. Um, let's just talk about lineups here before we get into this from a DFS perspective. The one thing I wanted to do is talk about what we project from these lineups because there is some team news, and then look at the previous game and see if there's any insights that we can glean. I mean, we don't want to over extrapolate from a one game sample, but we can use the previous leg to maybe inform some of our decisions about what we expect the game script to be and things of that nature. So the Inter side that we're projecting, I think it's the same team that started the first leg, but we have a back three of Bastoni, a Serbian Darmian. There's nothing too spectacular there. Bastoni's a bit adventurous as a center back, but game script probably will have him play more conventionally in that position. And then we'll have wing backs Federico DiMarco and Denzel Dumfries. DiMarco split set pieces for Inter along with Hakan Çalhanoğlu. Çalhanoğlu is going to be in the central midfield with Nico Barea and Henrik Mkhitaryan. And then we are projecting the two forwards starting to be Lautaro and Edin Dzeko. Now, it wouldn't be too terribly surprising to see Romelu Lukaku start for either of these two players, but Lautaro was rested over the weekend, so he came on as a substitute and scored a goal. So I do expect Lautaro to be handed the start, and I do expect Dzeko to be handed the start. He scored the goal. He scored the opening goal in the tie in the reverse fixture on Wednesday. Now, one thing worth paying attention to is Joaquin Correa. He might be out for this next game. And if he's not on the bench, that's one less forward sub that Inter can make. One thing we'll see when I flip over to the game log of what happened between these two teams on Wednesday was that Dzeko and Lautaro were both subbed off at the 70th minute. But if it's only Lukaku on the bench, say, then I think it can work out that one of the two forwards is going to get 90 minutes. So that should boost out of their projection. I would guess that would be Lautaro just because Dzeko is a bit of an old. Maybe I shouldn't disrespect Dzeko so much, but he did score the goal. But I feel like if you're going to have to choose a player to play 90 minutes, I would prefer to stick with Lautaro. On the AC Milan side, we're looking at their usual 4-2-3-1, but there's been a few wrinkles that have happened. First, down here, we see that Ismail Benassir, he's been splitting set pieces for AC Milan. He is confirmed out, I think. I think the manager did say he's out. We are not expecting him to play in this fixture. So that's going to change the set piece situation for AC Milan. What they did for the rest of the game, where after he left after the 20th minute, and then over the weekend in league when they lost to Spezia, was that Theo Hernandez returned to splitting set pieces with Sandro Tonali. So I expect Sandro Tonali and Theo Hernandez to be splitting set pieces in this one. That's a material upgrade for Theo Hernandez's projection. I think he's a little bit underpriced for someone taking set pieces. He's a guy I'd like to fit in cash games, especially when AC Milan have to chase the game. Theo Hernandez can be a very forward, offensive, leaning left back. So I feel like he's going to be a good fantasy asset in this one. But nothing too crazy in the back line. We got Theo Tomori, Kejer Calabria. Krunic is questionable. We'll see if he starts. I don't know who starts in his place, but no one really fantasy relevant. Tonali is the other midfielder in that pivot. And then we are expecting Rafael Leao to start. So if we look at what his manager said, I'll just read it out loud because I want to keep my tabs open so I can go forward and back. Stefano Pioli said that Leao seems to be fit. He trained almost fully Sunday, and we hope he'll be able to train completely on Monday. So it seems like Leao will be fit. Now, maybe that's a little bit optimistic, but this is going to be the most important game for AC Milan for the entire season. So even if he's not fully healthy, I do expect Leao to give it a go. Now, one issue that you might have with Leao is that what if he doesn't play and he's completely healthy? He's sometimes subbed at the 70th minute, often anyways. Sometimes often, no. But it does work out that Leao usually plays 70 minutes, like 70, 75 minutes. He doesn't often go for a full 90, as often happens with these wingers that get subbed early. So if we imagine that Leao, when healthy, isn't always going 90 minutes, and he does have that knock, he does have that injury, I think it's not quite a knock, then I really question his ability to be at peak performance, and I question his ability to go, more than 65 minutes. It's a situation where even if he does play, I don't know if I want to play him in tournaments, even though he has huge upside. That's sort of just like a risk tolerance decision that you're going to have to make for yourself. Leao might be relatively low rostered in tournament formats due to the injury worries and due to the fact that he's 9,600. But if he scores a goal in the first 45 minutes, then it might be wheels up for that. But it is quite a risky thing. You're going to be looking at very much like binary outcomes. He could completely bust for you, or he could be completely worthwhile. Um, yeah, maybe if I build 20 lineups, maybe I'll include him a few times. But right now, my inclination is to maybe look at other pieces. It kind of is a tough sell to play underdog injured players, even if they are really that talented. Matt S is in the chat. He's saying Badgers. Yeah, go Badgers. We are live from Madison right now. Anyway, that's my breakdown of the teams. We have Brahim Diaz, also an attacking midfielder. We are looking at Salamaker starting, and then Giroud will probably start leading the line. So one of the nice things that RotoWire offers is we have these cool game logs if you want to look at particular matchups between any two teams. And, it has all the odds. So you can look at what the odds were before the match starts. So in the previous match, we had Inter 40%. They're 45 today. They get a little bit of a boost for having the home fans and for winning the previous fixture. And you can look at the formation. We have little bubbles that tell you, oh, how much did people play? So you can see that Benacer came off at 18 minutes here. Salamaker's played 60. He almost always plays 60 in these formats. And we see here Dzeko and Martinez. They both got subbed off before the 90th minute. What else do we have? DeMarco, 70th minute sub. He is always subbed at the 70th minute, but he still has one of the best stone cold floors on the slate. He can be a very active wing back when the game script is right. We have all of the game events, so you have goals and assists and when people are subbed and for why. I think this all comes from Opta. But the nice thing that you can see here is the full team stats. You can see the sort of total fantasy relevant stat output for each of the teams. And one of the surprising things that I saw, because I mostly got to watch the first half, I didn't get to watch the second half as much. Inter were dominating the first half, and I expected possession maybe to be even. I did not expect it to be the case that AC Milan had held 57, not 75, 57% possession in this match. They were totally getting throttled earlier in the match, and I think this is probably a function of the fact that Inter let off the brakes a little bit, and they settled to defend a little bit more. They soaked up a little bit more Milan possession, soaked up the pressure, and just tried to defend long shots. I remember Sandro Tonali had a pretty good opportunity, but otherwise, I don't think AC Milan had any particularly strong opportunities. As we can see right here, they barely troubled Andre Onana. He only had 2 shots. He only had to make 2 saves. Whereas AC Milan, even though they didn't have the possession, they were much more ruthless when they had the possession. I mean, 5 shots on goal, more shots total. And of course, they did have the 2 key goals and assists. So my takeaway from this is that Inter are not exactly incentivized to attack too much. I think they're not going to be very casual about it. I mean, it still is a local rivalry game, but I do think that they're going to be more incentivized to play in the counter. So whereas maybe last week I was thinking that Inter would possess the ball like 55 to 60% of the time because they're the better team and that's what previous logs suggested, I do think in this one that it's going to be more of an even split and perhaps even more of Milan getting the possession in this one. So that's going to be very important for cash games as you think about floor because there are going to be some trade-offs that you have to make. I'm a bit more inclined to play Milan pieces in cash games, especially if I think they're going to have 55% possession in this one. And then we can go through notable player performances. One thing I noticed was that Sandro Tonali, he's kind of one of these boring defensive midfielder types. And, I usually don't expect him to rack up much of a floor. But if you take a look at his game logs, when AC Milan are chasing games, he can start to shoot a little bit more from distance. AC Milan might get a few more set pieces if they're pushing for corners, depending on how Inter defends. But he does have some untapped upside when he's chasing the game, right? AC Milan were down to Spezia over the weekend, and he hit 4 shots. So I think Tonali is going to be a pretty good play. I think it's reasonable to project maybe 1 or 2 shots from him. It's reasonable to project that Milan get a few set pieces in this one. He does cross a little bit more actively. So I do I do like Tonali in this matchup, even if AC Milan are slight underdogs. The other thing that stuck out to me, so looking at crosses, Theo Hernandez was crossing as they were chasing the game. That's not much of a surprise. Um, Corners, Tonali took the corners, but I think he took an indirect free kick, and so did Theo Hernandez as well. But yeah, I think Theo and Tonali both showed a pretty solid floor in this matchup, and again in a game script where they were chasing the game and they did have possession. So those two stick out to me as reasonable plays. And then if we scroll down and see what the AC Milan players did, Nico Barea, he's kind of a more boomer bust guy. He took a couple shots. You basically need a goal from Barea if you play him. Um, Kind of a boring day for Denzel Dumfries, but he got fouled a lot, so he had a nice floor. Anything else stick out? Yeah, Lautaro having only one shot was a huge bummer. Adam mentioned how he underperformed in his article, which you should check out on the site as well. So Adam Zadroik has a article breakdown. He might have some slightly different views than me, but it's really good. I highly recommend that you read it. Um, but yeah, Çalhanoğlu was subbed off a little bit early. Nothing too surprising from the inter-game logs. I mean, they got their output in early and then were inclined a little bit more to defend throughout the second half. All right, so I think we've had enough looking at that. We might expect AC Milan to possess the ball a bit more. Let's go back to the cheat sheet. We have Matt S in the chat. I'm looking for some unique builds to get different. Do you foresee a 2-4 build working here? Matt, are you talking about maybe in tournaments? So I'll talk about some tournament structures so we can follow up there. But do you mean like only 2 Inter Milan players and then 4 AC Milan players? I've actually have looked at some of those lineups. I think 3-3 constructions are quite good. Um, some of the Inter guys don't necessarily have great floors outside of Hakan Çalhanoğlu and Federico DiMarco. So if you wanted to only play those two and surround them by 4 AC Milan players, I think that's a perfectly reasonable strategy that you could take up. So let's follow up. Let me know if you can specify a little bit more though, and I can follow up with your question. All right, what do we have from the odds? Inter 45% to win. It's Inter are slightly favored, but it could go either way. And then a low implied total. So we have a implied goal total of 2.56, but no team's particularly likely to keep a clean sheet. Only 33% clean sheet odds for Inter. Goal scoring odds, no one particularly stands up for their odds. Dzeko probably gets a little bit of a boost because he scored last week, but that's plus 200, so that's hardly dominating. Lautaro, he'll be a conversation in cash games. We'll get to that later. He's plus 160 to score a goal anytime. It's a little bit of a boost. He plays 90 minutes, but that's a really steep price tag of 11,000 that requires you sacrificing a set piece taker on either side of these squads. I'm not sure how crazy I'm about that. Your AC Milan options are Giroud and Rafael Leao. Giroud is 2,000 cheaper for about the same goal scoring odds. Now he doesn't offer as much as Leao does. Leao shoots a lot more frequently and things like that, but that does feel like a pretty sizable discount. And then we already talked about set pieces. DiMarco and Çalhanoğlu will split. DiMarco will be subbed early. It's pretty easy to understand. And then we will have a split between Tonali and Theo Hernandez with Benazir out. So let's get into cash games. So I think there's like 5 plays who are definitely the most enticing, well projected plays on the slate. And so first is going to be the first 4 set piece takers: Hakan Çalhanoğlu, Federico DiMarco, Sandro Tonali, and Theo Hernandez. I think Tonali and Hernandez are pretty well priced, even if they are slight underdogs. So I think they make excellent cash game options. And DiMarco, he's almost always a cash game lock. I think he was like 60% in the captain spot in the big single entry double up. And I expect him to be that way again, especially when he's 1,000 cheaper than Çalhanoğlu. It doesn't really bother me that he's subbed off at 70 minutes. I mean, he seems to hit a 10-point floor like clockwork. Maybe we worry a little bit more about that if we don't think Inter possesses the ball as much, but I still think he gets there. Inter are the favored. We want to play the home favorite set piece takers when we can. I mean, okay, home team, quote unquote. Yeah, then the other option is Çalhanoğlu. He's 1,000 more expensive. I certainly understand if you want to captain Çalhanoğlu. His minutes are a bit more safe. I feel like he might be a little less volatile, but DiMarco might have a little bit more upside, in my personal opinion, if you're thinking about tournaments. So I think one option that you can do right away is you can just plug in all 4 of those guys into a cash game team. So you can like captain DeMarco, plug in Çalhanoğlu, plug in Theo, and plug in Sandro Tonali. And then it's a little bit uncomfortable what to do with your last 2 spots. One moderately popular strategy in the reverse fixture was to include Onana as a flex option. And you can certainly afford Onana in this type of construction, but with only 33% clean sheet odds, and now he's been priced up to 7,000, that might be a little bit rich. So I'm less inclined to do that. And I'm also left with a situation where if I plug these 4 guys in, I only have 12,000 salary left. And that means I can't play Lautaro. Now, I know it really doesn't feel like Lautaro is not necessarily a cash game option, but he was over 50% rostered in the single entry double ups and rostered by very sharp players who I study and I respect a lot. And I think it's for good reason. Lautaro, maybe 35% of the time scores a goal, 35 or 40% of the time, then you're definitely going to want him in the lineup, especially in a lower scoring matchup. So this is one way that we can look at goal scores in the showdown format, right? If you don't have that goal score, you have less spots to make those points up in your lineup in general. I'm not necessarily sure that it applies in this slate because I think Tonali could get an 8 to 10 point floor. I think Theo Hernandez is up for an 8-point floor in this one. And then you do want the intercept piece takers as well. If I have to sacrifice one of those pieces to get Lautaro, and he's not a significant improvement because all those guys do have pretty solid floors, I feel less incentivized to allocate my salary to do that in this case. But I certainly do understand that if you want to play instead of Tonali, play a Lautaro just because he is the home favorite goal scorer. I do understand that template. I'm just not sure it's the optimal way to go. It's something I would more consider in tournaments. So you're going to have to decide if the Lautaro trade off is good for you. But the way I will think through it is, are you definitely going to win when he scores a goal? And are you able to win enough of the times when he doesn't score a goal in your cash games? I think the calculus goes towards that. I think I would rather gamble that he doesn't score and think I still can beat those lineups even if he does score. But I mean, it's close. These decisions are pretty tough. Figuring out which of the 4 of those 5 guys you want to play, that's probably going to be what ultimately decides if you're going to cash or not. But yeah, how else can we handle these other 2 spots? So, like I said, Lautaro might be a little too expensive, but you'll see him because of his goal scoring odds. I wouldn't play Leao in cash just due to the injury and minutes worries. Dzeko is a tournament option. I probably won't even play him in tournaments. I think he'll be popular and he's a little bit expensive. Nico Barea, it's like paying for Ilkay Gundogan, but he doesn't necessarily take set pieces. He's not on as good as a team, and he's more expensive. So I think he's a nice tournament option, especially if you want to pivot from Lautaro because you can save 2,800. I think that's a great tournament tactic, but I don't know, not in cash games. I've already mentioned Tonali. He's going to, I think, shoot a little bit in this fixture. So again, 2 shots, maybe 4 is a little bit rich, but I do think he supplies a good floor. Drew, we don't play in cash games. If you don't want to play Onana, I certainly understand playing Denzel Dumfries in this spot. Denzel Dumfries is a really tilting DFS player. I feel like he kind of always underperforms my expectation. In the World Cup, he was famous for getting yellow cards, but I think he's a pretty good play in this spot. He can get there on tackles 1, get a few crosses, and I think he is eligible for clean sheet points as well. Let me double check that while I go through. Let's see what DraftKings says. Yeah, he is eligible for clean sheet points. So I think that's a pretty good play. Certainly, if you want to just pivot from Onana to play Denzel Dumfries, I think that's perfectly fine. And what do we want to do for our last spots? You can play Onana or Dumfries. There are some decent punt options. So if I sort by price, yeah, Theo Hernandez is I think I definitely want to play him in cash. I think Adam is a little less enthusiastic, but if he's taking set pieces and if he's pushing on the flank all game and Inter do allow possession, I think Theo Hernandez is like easily gonna supply value at his cost. Salamakers always gets subbed. Bastoni, he's kind of an attacking center back, so he's kind of an interesting piece, but the script isn't right for Inter. Calabria, you can take a shot there in tournaments if you want. I think the cash game options reappear when we're looking at these 2 down here. So we have Brahim Diaz at 4,800. He got fouled 5 times in the last fixture and he played 80 minutes. So if he starts, depending on the bench, I think there's a good chance he does go for 80 minutes instead of being subbed early. I think he's a pretty good cash game option. It's a little bit boom bust, but I mean, you're paying 5,000, less than 5,000 for an attacking midfielder who might end up getting subbed. So I think Brahim Diaz is a good value in cash games, and he's a helpful piece to use. Perhaps Matt, in those 2-4 constructions for tournaments, if you want to afford too expensive Inter players, I think Diaz will be a great GPP option. Hopefully, he doesn't get steamed too much. The other name I think that game log watchers will like is Henrik Mkhitaryan. So Mkhitaryan scored a goal. I think it was the second goal in the opening fixture, and he did get an assist over the weekend. But there's really no floor with Mkhitaryan. You're kind of just playing a favored midfielder. If you look at his logs, okay, he got 10 points over the weekend, but 6 of those were from the assists. So that's a 4-point floor. And then he got the goal, but that was 17 points, and that's only a 7-point floor. So these aren't terrible stats by any means, but you're mostly looking at 4 or 5-point performances. If that's the last place you need because you're happy with the other pieces in your cash game team, I think I say go for it. But he's not necessarily a smash play, especially if he gets popular in tournaments. But yeah, he's not a must, but he's a good idea. So I think that describes the cash game construction. You have to decide if you want to use Lautaro. If you do, good luck on deciding who to fade, because I think all 4 of the set piece takers are great plays. DeMarco, Çalhanoğlu, Tonali, and Theo. I think they should be in a good. I think all of those guys are in good spots. And then you just fill in the last 2 pieces: Onana, a Dumfries, a Brahim Diaz, whoever you like. So I think there's going to be a lot of overlap in this one. I can't quite deliver the nuts like Adam did for this recent Leicester City Liverpool showdown, but I think this will get you on the right direction. And of course, we'll have to adjust. Maybe the starting 11s change, and maybe the personnel changes as well. All right. Well, that was 20 minutes. I need to take a sip. Let's wrap up a little bit by talking about GPPs. So I thought about a couple different angles. So I think 3 of the most popular Inter players are going to be Lautaro, Hakan Çalhanoğlu, and Federico DiMarco. And it's tough to play all 3 of them in the same lineup. If you captain one of them, let me pull up the create lineup tool. So like if I captain Çalhanoğlu and then put in Lautaro and DiMarco, it's going to get salary's going to get a little bit tight. You're looking at about 5,000 salary left. And you can only play if you play someone like a Tonali, you're going to be left with punting twice. You have less than 34. You have 6,700 salary left for the rest of your spots. So that doesn't seem like a particularly strong construction if you're punting twice, and playing chalky players at the same time. And if you decide to go down a little bit more, Theo Hernandez. Okay, in this case, maybe you can play Brahim Diaz and a center back or something. I just don't think it's the best type of tournament construction. So if I had to make a suggestion about tournament constructions to avoid, I would avoid playing all 3 of these players together with one of them as a captain. I just think you're going to run into too many similar players as other lineups, and you're kind of going to be flipping coins on really thin 2v2s. So I don't particularly care for that construction. Maybe you do, and I think it's not bad because you're playing good players, and maybe you can find that like nice low cost piece that you need. But that's just not the way I like to attack tournament lineups. I'd like to try to get a slightly unique structure that still projects well, so I can have a little bit more leverage on the field. And I think this goes into starting to think about Matt S's points about looking at like 2-4 builds. So you're looking at something like having 2 Inter pieces and then 4 AC Milan pieces on the other side. I like doing this with someone like a Theo Hernandez and the captain. So Theo Hernandez will be taking set pieces, and Inter will be, AC Milan. I keep on mixing these teams up, both teams from Milan, and Milan will be pushing down the flank. So you can play someone like Theo, and then you have a few moves available to you. You could play Çalhanoğlu, DiMarco, and Lautaro, and you could still build a decent lineup. I don't think you can include Tonali in that lineup, but you can include other AC Milan pieces. Maybe you can throw in a Giroud and punt. You'll have to see for yourself. But I like that sort of construction. It's definitely a way that you can fit in all 3 of those Inter pieces in a slightly more unique way. and that kind of game script speculates a more back and forth affair, but you're still playing all good players, just sort of in unique combination. Um, Matt S saying two in the captain. So I think that I would be less likely to put two Inter players in my lineup, to do two Inter players and four AC Milan while having an Inter player in the captain spot. Um, I think that just has to do with how I expect the game to flow. So that sort of script is going to speculate that the Inter guys, you do want them as the captain. They are going to be the best captain, so probably one of the best set piece takers. That they're definitely going to get there, and that the other team is basically chasing the game the entire time, but none of the other four players necessarily outscores any of them. It's just tough to really imagine that sort of script hitting. I think it implies Inter scoring a goal or two, because if AC Milan score a couple goals, maybe someone contributes twice. Um, I don't know. I think you can definitely do it, right? You could just play Çalhanoğlu and DeMarco, and then play four attacking pieces on AC Milan and just hope everyone does well and you get the AC Milan pieces. I think I would rather captain an AC Milan player though in that type of script, because it does imply that AC Milan are fairly successful. Um, but I think pricing allows it, so I'll leave that call up to you. I do sort of like this idea though of two Inter players, but you do four AC Milan players, including one of the AC Milan players and captain. I do think that's fairly enticing. Um, yeah, so hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, another reason I like these sort of Theo Hernandez builds, and then if you start with like Theo and then the three Inter players I mentioned, Çalhanoğlu, DeMarco, and Lautaro, well, you can start to get a little bit more leverage, a little bit more unique by taking out one of these three Inter players. So one move that I like to make is save 2,800 salary by unplugging Lautaro and putting in Nico Barea. And then this type of construction is going to allow you to get up to someone like Tonali. So you can play a Tonali in Calabria and hope that you can get a little bit more output from the AC Milan pieces. But these ideas extend to a lot of different captains. So another player in the range is Denzel Dumfries, if you want to include him in the captain, because Inter are less likely to push. I'm less likely to put Denzel Dumfries because I think he's less likely to contribute a goal or assist. But if you disagree, you can get sort of a similar philosophy behind putting Denzel Dumfries in the captain spot. And Onana is also in the same price range. So if you want to captain Onana, then you can play challenge. You can play, you can play all three of those guys that I mentioned before, but you wouldn't necessarily have an AC Milan set piece taker. I would probably do something like an Onana, Çalhanoğlu, DeMarco, and then maybe play someone like Barea with Theo Hernandez or something similar to that. I do like these mid-price captains in this game so that we can afford the three best Inter players. That's a decent way to handle maybe the game ends 1-1 or the game ends 1-0, where AC Milan are chasing the game the entire time. If you want to get even more different, you can be a little bit more aggressive on the AC Milan side. I certainly understand anyone who might be less inclined to play chalky Hakan Çalhanoğlu. I mean, he's got a really good floor, but if you look at some of his recent game logs, um, goals and assists have sort of made up for less than enthusiastic performances. So at Roma, he only had 6 floor points. That would be a huge bust at 10.2K. He did get up to 14 fantasy points against Milan in the previous fixture, but that included an assist. That's only an 8-point floor. Do you think you really need a Hakan Çalhanoğlu floor if he only gets 8 points? Again, he scored 22 points here, but it's 10 points if you remove the goal. It's certainly interesting to try to fade some of these chalkier Inter pieces if you want. I think it's probably best practice to fade Lautaro, but if you want to be someone who plays, Lautaro, Barea, and then slots in DeMarco as well, I think Çalhanoğlu is slightly fadeable. And if you want to extend this logic, I think I'll probably be someone who plays Federico DeMarco in most of my lineups. But if he's not going to be bombing forward, if Inter aren't going to be earning corners throughout the game, then where's DeMarco's value going to come from if he's going to be subbed off at the 65th minute, because he's a more attacking player in general? It's easy to imagine that Inter keep the lead in the 65th minute and they slot in more defensive personnel. So I definitely see some fragility in all these Inter chalk and kind of figuring out which is the correct fragile spot. I think that might be the key to winning tournaments. Um, and let's throw in by building a Mike Magnan captain. We can end with that. So I like the idea of being a little bit heavier on AC Milan because they can win 1-0 and not have to worry about Inter pushing the game still. So you can still so I think it makes sense you can still fade Inter Milan pieces in a nice 1-0 game script. That's one of like the unique pieces that these two-legged ties offer. So it's pretty interesting to look at Mike Magnan captains because he's pretty cheap. He's only 5,200, so he's 7,800 in the captain. So if you do Mike Magnan, you can include Hakan Çalhanoğlu and Federico DiMarco, and then you can basically play whoever you want in the last spots. So I don't think that you can include both Rafael Leao and Sandro Tonali, but you can definitely include Leao. And if you want to play Leao, maybe this makes sense in that sort of lineup because if Leao busts and only gets 4 points, you still might win in case it's a 1-0 lineup and your other two players contribute to a goal. But if you do this sort of start like Magnan, Çalhanoğlu, DiMarco, you can fit a lot of nice pieces in. You know, you can play Tonali and Theo Hernandez, and then you can slot in. You can play Salamakers if you want for 60 minutes. Go for an early goal. You can play Calabria. You can play basically any combination of the relatively mid-priced AC Milan attackers that you want. Oh, and of course you can throw in Giroud. So I'll probably build a few lineups that look like that as well. So this one a little longer than expected. I thought I'd be a little bit I thought this one would be a bit brief, but I still managed to talk for a half hour. So let's close it up at that. If you like the show, please give it a like, please subscribe to the channel, and please join us. You can get the 48-hour free trial. There's links on the YouTube page. But yeah, check out Adam's article. We'll be back with some more content tomorrow. And yeah, good luck in all of your contests. We'll see you around.